This two-part audio and video podcast with Anthony Phillips, the former Genesis guitarist, is brought to you by Make a Difference with Records. Based in Godalming, we donate all our proceeds from record sales to the mental health charity Catalyst. Find out more about us at makeadifferencewithrecords.com. This is part 2.
My name's Anthony from Make a Difference with Records, and I'm here with Anthony Phillips for part 2. You can tell it's been a long morning. For part 2 of That's My Final Answer. And Anthony, this is where we get very serious, as I've just noticed. We get very serious. And we move on from your own music and we talk about, or at least mostly we move on from your own music, and we talk about your first musical loves, your musical influences.
Yes, of course.
Over time. And we limber up with some really easy questions. And the first one is, can you remember what the first album you ever bought was?
Well, I was struggling actually to think of the first album. Actually, I can remember a group of singles of which it could be. So maybe I'll do that first.
I knew he was going to be trouble. He's going on to question 2 now.
I'll come back to one in relation to 2.
Yeah.
Because being a schoolboy, couldn't really. Obviously, with his pocket money, couldn't afford.
Yeah.
If I was getting interested in music, couldn't really afford an album. So I think I bought. It's either the ones I've written down. It was either "Return to Sender" by Elvis.
Yes.
The next time by Cliff, or "Apache" by the Shadows. Now, very quickly. Within about, and that was what inspired me to play the guitar. And I remember doing a live performance of Foot Tapper with another guitarist at school when I was about 11. But then in the early '63, suddenly there was this electric sound hit the radio, which was "Please Please Me" by the Beatles.
Yes.
And it just transformed everyone's lives. And I'm pretty sure that the first album I would have bought would have been the first Beatles album, which was just called The Beatles,
yes.
I think, yes. And was recorded in 7 hours or something.
Do you still have it? You still have those copies, all those singles? You don't?
No, I let lots go. I've got a sheet music from which my mum used to send me Beatles sheet musics down, so I could get my guitar teacher to show me the chords.
Yes.
I've still got a From Me to You sheet music, which costs 2 and 6.
Okay.
It costs 2 and 6, which to people who don't know would have been 12.5p.
Something like that.
Yes, I'm no good at maths. So I'm pretty sure that my first album would have been the first Beatles album. I don't remember buying a Shadows album.
So did you used to trot down the hill from Charterhouse to Record Corner?
That was later.
This
is back when I was at St Edmunds at prep school in 62, 63, yes.
Okay.
No, I'm 10 and 11 at this point. I didn't go to Charterhouse eons of things happened by the time I went to Charterhouse, because there was so much music, so many bands, so much happened in 63, 64, 65 before I went to Charterhouse.
Yeah. So at the age of 10 you were buying your first single?
Yeah.
In what? Was it like a W.H. Smith's or a Woolworths? Because there weren't really that many pure record shops then, were there?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have done it in the country, because we were boarding school. We were literally, it was even more prison camp than Charterhouse. So it would have been in London. Where it would have been in London, I honestly really can't remember.
Yeah.
It's even possible that I asked Mum to buy them for me, possibly. It might even buy it, but I really can't remember. That's a really tough call. That's a long way back to remember that.
No, absolutely. I'm not
remember
sure.
Where you bought them.
Just sometimes when you think about a record, it brings back, it evokes kind of smells, places, experiences, and I just wondered whether you could remember it, but I'm not sure I remember where I bought my first album.
You know, it's funny, I don't think I've ever had a go-to record shop I could remember in my life, really. I know that at Charterhouse we used to go down and listen to records in the booth there, in whatever the shop was called in Godalming.
Record Corner.
Record Corner, thank you.
Who are competitors of ours.
Really?
Well, they're sort of. We both sell second-hand records. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not the enemy.
Favorite album you keep, one you keep going back to time after time?
Yeah, so that's the next question. So it's a really, really tough one, because I don't know about you, but I sometimes find my favourite album is a different album depending what day of the week it is and what month of the year It is, but there's usually an album that you just gravitate to when you're kind of undecided about what you want to listen to. Is there any one in particular that you...
I think to be honest, because of my sort of Damascene conversion to, I hate to use the word classical music, but discovering the music of the last 600 years, which includes the classical period, which that's why I hate it being called classical music, because that's what it is. And within that last 600 years, there's so much music.
Yeah.
So I probably, over the last period, since my group days, have gravitated between what we call classical music and also film music as well.
Yes, yeah.
Very much so, where it seemed that unlike in rock, where you weren't allowed to do fusion anymore because that was all uncool, you can get a guy's film score will have a brilliant car chase music with some heavy, and then you've got a beautiful, beautiful strings, love scene. So there's a lot more sort of freedom within that genre. But I was thinking about tracks. I think I'm thinking more of tracks of a complete album. I mean, I will go back to some of the Beatles albums, definitely.
Yes.
From Revolver onwards.
Yeah.
Any of the Beatles albums, Revolver onwards, I will listen to and love. Again, I think there's not every track. I think as you get older, you probably become a bit more selective with the tracks. But any of those Beatles, I think the ones I've chosen were Court of the Crimson King, which had such an enormous influence on the group at the time, and I came back to recently and was astonished. I thought it would sound quite dated, but I was astonished by how powerful, how relevant the lyrics were, how colourful the lyrics were, and how brilliant how it had lasted in terms of the instrumentation. I think there's a lot of nostalgia mixed up because of how it affected us, so many people were influenced by that album. It laid down a blueprint for music being played live of a much tighter and much more dramatic quality as well, which very much influenced Tony, Genesis. And although Tony was against mellotrons to start with, he very quickly came round to it.
Do you still have your Mellotron, by the way?
I do. The one, yes, I have mine. It blew up at one stage, but mine was the one that was played by come on, this is terrible. This is mere names as well. Elton John's keyboard player, who became a very famous film composer.
Now I feel embarrassed because I should know.
This is terrible. This is terrible. I mean, it will come back to me. I love his work, but names are beginning to go here and there. Another one I come back to and absolutely adore is What We Did on a Holiday by Fairport Convention.
Okay.
There's a group of albums that very much influenced Mike and myself.
Yeah.
When we were doing the sort of parallel with the 12-string improvisation albums of groups who were starting. I suppose in a way, this is a general thing, but Sgt. Pepper was a big leaping off point. Because Day in the Life particularly, because Day in the Life suddenly allowed you to do longer format piece with a lot of different sections.
Okay.
And no one said, "Oh, this is very bitty."
Yeah.
And after that, it was difficult to turn the clock back. In fact, we were writing, much to Jonathan King's dismay, we were writing quite long 4 or 5 minute epics with lots of bits. He had no time for that at all, and he
2.5 minute
he paired us right back. Well, he wanted instant single success, which was his area, and he was entitled to that. But that wasn't ultimately, thank God, where the group was going to end up. I come back to What We Did on a Holiday by Fairport Convention, Music in a Doll's House by The Family, which had a long track called The Voyage on, which was...
I don't know that one.
And actually the one 12-string player, I've got to be careful here, one 12-string acoustic guitarist I was influenced by was by Charlie Whitney.
Right.
They did on the next album. They did a track called "The Weaver's Answer," and the more percussive 12-string. I was quite influenced by him. And the other one was Procol Harum, "Shine On Brightly."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very much so. Also, from a melodic point of view, I think Simon and Garfunkel's "Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme." I mean, I absolutely love Scarborough Fair, and they were so melodic. Tony adored
The
Tony
harmonies
Banks. Yeah,
are really...
Tony adored Paul Simon, and his writing was unbelievable. Things like that album's got The Dangling Conversation, it's got Homeward Bound, but
Yeah.
Scarborough Fair is obviously a traditional song, but I associated that with the love of my life, Lucy Burge, who I remember going to see it with, and it was in The Graduate as well.
Yes.
And it is so powerful.
Yeah.
It is so powerful. And they both sang like angels. But I think probably the standout track I would take from those would be, I don't know if you know it, but on what we did on our holiday at Fairport, there's a track called Fotheringay, which later created the group Fotheringay. And it's one of the most beautiful but understated lyrics I've ever come across. It's about Mary Queen of Scots' last night at the castle of Fotheringay. And unless you really know what's going on, you don't really know. It's just she looks over the castle walls and thinks what might have been. And it is so powerful. And Richard McPhail was our a friend, he was in the school group and then later became involved with Genesis. But he was the one, he'd left school early and had a job, so he could afford these albums. And so he'd be slapping headphones on us, and Mike and I, and we were suddenly listening to stuff where you'd have Simon Nicol playing here, Richard Thompson here.
Yeah.
They were 6 strings, but not 12 strings. And this is mind-boggling, because stereo hadn't really existed much before this.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that was an enormous influence. But that has not, to me, dated at all. I come back to that, and I just think it's a complete masterpiece. So, whereas there's other tracks on the album which are a bit mott rock, and you think, I think I was very interested as well by the track at the end called "End of a Holiday," which was a sort of miniature by Simon Nicol, which I used to teach my pupils, and it's the masterpiece of a miniature masterpiece. And it concludes the album brilliantly. "End of a Holiday." So those would be my
choices from a musical perspective.
and I think probably I wrote down those Beatles albums. I think Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour, White Album, Hello Goodbye. I mean, Hello Goodbye in particular. I mean, I listened to the White Album on the way back from Cornwall with Patricia. And yes, it does. I mean, I think it's everyone's chucking this stuff in.
Yeah.
And you can argue that it would have made it's a great double album. It would have made an even better single album if you'd been able to make the choice. And it's not all the tracks aren't for everybody, but within that, the diversity of stuff is just breathtaking.
So if we move on from favourite albums in the sense of music to one of the things that, like it or loathe it, one of the things that vinyl has done is it brought back perhaps more into focus the artwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is one of the things I remember. You buy a record and the first thing you look at is the artwork, and particularly if it was a gatefold, you'd spend as much time on that as you would the lyrics. Is there a particular album cover that really resonates with you, that sticks out as one of your favourites?
I was thinking about this quite a lot. I mean, I think Sgt. Pepper for depth of interest.
Yes.
Which is obviously the colour in them and then spotting all the faces.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some wonderfully elaborate album covers like Dear Mr. Fantasy by Traffic and stuff like that, with the gatefold and stuff like that. But I'm going to be quite not selfish, because I didn't do them. I would actually go for the Geese and the Ghost and Private Parts and Pieces 1 as 2 of my favourite album covers, because I just think of a lyrical side, they are unbelievably beautiful. And I would stick my neck out even further and saying I don't think there's many artists that can paint as well as Peter that do album covers.
Well, there's something about the artwork on Geese and the Ghost and the music. They're very symbiotic. Is that the right word? They're very symbiotic, I think. There's a feeling to it. They're very much in harmony, I think, the artwork.
Well, of course, he had the album. A lot of guys are doing an album cover before the thing's finished.
Yeah.
He had the album for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. So he knew the album well when he was doing it,
Yeah.
which probably helped a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So the Geese and the Ghost. We then come on to, this is where you get a bit of a free rein because you can go in your time machine should you wish. But is there any particular artist you would either like to have collaborated with and the opportunity's gone, or would in the future like to collaborate with from a writing?
I think if I'd been lucky enough or good enough, I think either I could have very happily written with Lennon and McCartney, Jagger, Richards, any of the people from those groups at the time, Paul Simon, but I wouldn't have been good enough, I don't think, to be honest. But I was incredibly happy writing with Mike, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have been happy going on with that because we were completely simpatico. But
Well, the Geese and the Ghost, the fact that
Yeah.
it is so loved and has stood up over so many decades, it has been
thank you.
decades, is testimony to that.
Yes, I mean, there's so many. If I take artists, I mean, there's some artists you can think of who were so solo artists. You can't think of them writing with anybody else, can you? Like Joni Mitchell and people like that.
Yes.
You can't really think of her collaborating with anybody.
Yeah.
Neil Young and people like that. You know, they're great,
Would
but
just
you
be
can't.
no space, would there,
Yeah.
for you? It was because it's them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in a dream world to have written with Lennon or McCartney or Jagger Richards or Ray Davies or someone would have been, you know, the people that were purveying all the really groundbreaking stuff, and the stuff which has really influenced so many later groups as well. If you think about it.
And if we stick with the time machine capabilities and we think about concerts that you would ideally have liked to have seen or would want to see again, what would you pick?
Well, I've got some interesting choices here, which I think are going to surprise you, because parallel to the brilliant pop groups that were all about the phenomenal material, and the playing didn't necessarily have to be that fantastic. A lot of it was done in the studio and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Running parallel to that from 1965, 66 onwards, of course, was the blues boom.
Okay.
And I picked up quite early a whole group of us from Charterhouse, unbeknownst to our parents. We somehow got away with it at the age of 13 or 14.
Yeah.
We went to see John Mayall.
Oh, and the Blues Breakers. Yeah.
That's right. When Eric Clapton had left because the Yardbirds had gone commercial.
Okay.
And so became absolutely hooked live on the virtuosity of. I mean, John Mayall was very good, but he surrounded himself with phenomenal musicians.
Yes.
So we would follow around. I mean, we were at Charterhouse, so we could only do it during the school holidays. But Eric Clapton, then Peter Green. I think almost the best band, my best live band, would have been the one that had John Mayall, Ainsley Dunbar on drums. That was the coin toss for Hendrix, you know that, don't you? Yeah. And played with Zappa. And Peter Green was absolutely a master. I mean, he was a master. I mean, all that group were brilliant, but for the minor blues, you didn't even need distortion, really. It was so soulful, his stuff. And I mean, he was clearly capable of writing wonderful music as well, because, I mean, I don't think that Albatross has any sort of precursor, and they're still using that on adverts, aren't they? So he really had something special, poor chap. But I think I was so lucky as well in going to the first Cream gig ever.
Oh, you did?
At Windsor Jazz and Blues Festival with Rob Tyrrell, our drummer, in '66.
Yeah.
And I got headbutted at Richmond Station on the way back. It's another story. But we used to go and then see the early Cream gigs where they were playing to 150 people in the pub upstairs.
Yes.
And these were absolutely top flight musicians playing. Okay, the material, the songs might have been arguably sometimes maybe not incredibly wonderful songs, but more vehicles for solos, but some of them were good. But I mean, the electricity between these players, and Jack Bruce was a brilliant bassist as well as singer. Ginger Baker, although he was a rather objectionable person, was a very, very good drummer. But Eric Clapton at that point, I don't think he's ever been better.
Yes.
And the thrill of these guys playing together was the other thing. They were still at the point where they were really, really, really excited. So the interaction
But raw
between
energy.
raw energy.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, within 6 months, they were playing with 200-watt Marshalls at the marquee. They were standing apart from each other, and it was like they'd already lost it.
Yeah.
And so I would go.
Oh, wow.
I would go for those.
That is a special one.
I would go for those because they were intimate. I don't like big concerts.
No, I'm not a big fan of open air concerts.
No, because it's the intimacy.
I prefer that because very few people play theatres these days.
I know.
Which is a shame. But there you go.
I did see the Beatles.
Where?
Oh gosh, it was southwest London somewhere. I'd stress C. I think I heard a chord and that was it.
The screaming drowned out the
Absolutely, didn't hear a note.
Yeah,
That's right.
That would have done my head.
Never saw the Stones. Missed the Hyde Park concert where King Crimson was supposed to have actually been better.
Wow, well, those are very special choices. I'd want to move you on, if I may, to, shall I call it the meat in the sandwich? I think of a better title than that. Which is when we ask musicians in the context of mental health, as you know,
Absolutely.
we support a charity that mainly does work in the mental health space. And one of the reasons we do this podcast is we try and connect people with music in a way that, you know, if people are needing a moment of quiet reflection, or if they just want to just kind of forget things and just have pure escapism. And we therefore ask artists to think about 3 different albums or pieces of music that they think might be relevant, and we're just building up. It's a virtual library. We're building a virtual library up of material. So what have you chosen for us, Anthony?
I have chosen 3 with some possible extras, but I don't want to be greedy and give you the extras because I mean, I've chosen the 3 I've chosen are more for, I was thinking about this because some people want, if you're in a state of mental disarray, you know, we've all been there to better and, you know, worse and less in degrees. We all want peace, and at times you just need something that is going to be, you really crave. I mean, some people sit and listen to mantras and stuff like that, but the musical equivalent, you want something that's actually going to bring calm to you. Now, other times you might want something to lift your mood, which is more positive and triumphant. And so I've thought actually about a couple of those as well. But the ones I would choose for the calm, serenity, and peace, and incidentally, I tried to make sure that Slow Dance ended like that.
Well, it was chosen by Bruce Sword of the Pineapple Thief as one of his 3 albums.
You told me that.
Yeah.
I was so flattered about that because I wanted that end. I mean, I suppose there's a comparison with the Sleepfall, which is you go out in peace, but Slow Dance is a bit more like a disturbed journey. And then finally, at times, you come to, well, you go through the sort of emotional bit, and then it flattens out into that kind of Chinese Zen sort of peaceful. And so I was thinking of pieces, obviously far better pieces, but I mean, I always loved Vaughan Williams. Vaughan Williams is known for a variety of pieces, but he tends to be better known with the majority of people for Thomas Tallis and The Shark Ascending, as the orchestral players call it. But I've chosen his 5th Symphony and the 4th movement.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very still and restful, and it ends with spiraling strings just drifting up, and it's almost like going to heaven. The 3rd movement also, I've chosen the last part of Ravel's Mother Goose Suite.
Right.
Which I love the whole piece, but some of the rest of it's a little bit more, if you wanted one mood, it does move around a little bit too much. But the last piece begins with these elegiac strings, and then builds to it's not too loud, otherwise I wouldn't have chosen it, builds to a wonderful resolution, which just leaves you feeling optimistic. So first of all, you feel quite moved by it, but calmed by it. And then it takes you to this place where you feel, gosh, life's worth living.
Yes.
And finally, is a miniature that was played to me. In fact, all these three pieces were played to me by a certain lady at a point, and I didn't know any of them. It's a miniature from the Henry V Suite by William Walton called Touch Her Soft Lips and Part.
Right.
Touch Her Soft Lips and Part.
Right.
And it's some people might think it's a little bit saccharine. For me, it's just on the right side.
Okay.
But it's absolutely beautiful. And again, it ends with this stillness, and you just want to put it on again.
Okay.
You just want to just keep going. Again, I'd have it on repeat. I could do it three or four times.
Okay.
But I also thought about pieces. Rupert Hine at his funeral had D-listers walk to the Paradise Garden,
right,
which in the restful section, which is an amazingly restful piece as well. And Respighi's Pines of Rome, Fountains of Rome. I don't know if you know that.
No, I don't.
I mean, they're absolutely beautiful pieces.
I shall look it up when we're done. But
I mean, there's a number of other pieces I've jotted down here, like, I think for a restful, possibly Eric Satie's Gymnopédie would be another one, because it's sort of hypnotic, but it's maybe not quite as, I mean, this is subjective, it's maybe not quite as emotionally stirring. It's calming as some, for me, as some of the other ones I've chosen. Now, many people would argue that Nimrod from Enigma Variations is it's a little bit too associated, unfortunately, with the cenotaph and stuff in terms of the sadness.
Yes.
But there is a feeling of it is very emotional. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be calming people down or making them help to get a. I mean, because sometimes you need to give vent to your emotions, and you need to cry and get the frustration out of your system, don't you? So we're talking different slightly types. There's music to calm down to, and there's music that is actually
100%.
It allows you to outpour. And my mother loved Rachmaninoff's Symphony 2, the third movement. And I can't listen to that without tears, because it was at her funeral. And it just gets me every time, and it's so cathartic.
Yes.
It's so cathartic.
Yeah.
Actually, I've just thought of something completely different, which is going back to that, MacArthur's Park.
Oh yes.
MacArthur's Park always did it for me. Partly again because I think
Harris?
Yes, partly because I think I associated it with Lucy Burge, who was the but I cannot listen to that, the middle part of that, and it finishes off with after all the days of my life, I'll be thinking of you.
Yes.
And I can't listen to that without I'm a goner every time. Actually,
God, If I Saw Her Now does that to me
really?
For similar reasons.
Sweetheart. So I would suggest there's different pieces. I mean, obviously in the film world, you've got things like Schindler's List and Morricone's Gabriel's Oboe. I mean, they're so beautifully dignified and so sad. Well, I'd say Gabriel's Oboe is probably more on the pathos side, whereas Schindler's List is just so sad, isn't it? But again, for outpouring of emotion.
Yes.
As opposed to just pure meditative calm. But I would still stick with those first three for calm, serenity, peace.
And if we're talking about more escapism, more just getting out of there and forgetting stuff, what are we into there?
Oh gosh, escapism. That's difficult.
So I have an escapism album, which is Haircut 100, Fantastic Day, which probably because it reminds me of university, and everything was fine and the sun was shining.
And
it's a saccharine pop album, But if I want to forget
No,
about...
I like them. No,
if I want to
like...
forget about stuff, I can just put that on and that does it for me. But it's not the best album necessarily, but from an escapism point of view, it works really well.
It's interesting, isn't it, that? How do you define escapism? I mean, you could argue that the first three pieces I've chosen are escapism, as in terms of you're escaping to a quiet place.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So what does escapism actually mean? The
Yeah.
other ones I've chosen are ways of outpouring your emotion.
One perhaps is a sense of self-awareness and reflection, and you're actually thinking about things, whereas the other, you're not really necessarily thinking about anything, you're just experiencing this noise and the album, and you're somewhere else and you're not thinking about the things that might be troubling you.
True. Funnily enough, I would probably... Yeah, I think certainly... I remember during 1982 was a troubled year.
Yeah.
And I would often put on the album Gaucho by Steely Dan.
Oh, yes.
Particularly the track Gaucho, because it's so clever.
Yeah.
And then Third World Man. They're both so brilliant and so evocative, but they are definitely escaping to a completely different milieu.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of US California, but there's a kind of coolness to it as well. So it's almost like you're driving in a Cadillac through the, on the highway.
Yeah.
So for me, that would be good. If the sun was shining here and I was putting the window down in the summer, those I used to listen to that.
Yeah.
And I also used to listen to Alan Parsons' Turn of a Friendly Card, the same summer.
Album.
So those two albums would have been signature escapism albums for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that constant hook that comes back
Absolutely.
in that album. It's
And I
very
think
cleverly done.
Time is a very clever pop song.
Yeah.
Very clever pop song.
Yeah.
Big Eric. We met Big Eric. Sorry, that's another matter.
Have you?
Yeah, well, Alan and Big Eric were working in EMI 2 when I was with Andy Latimer in EMI 3.
Oh, okay.
And they're both very, very tall, but Eric was always coming and listening. He was a very nice man, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very talented too. He's dead, sadly.
Yeah, he very sadly. What's that track on Eye in the Sky that's As Far as My Eyes Can See?
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, you talk about crying your eyes out.
Yeah.
That one does
it. They were brilliant. They were brilliant. My brother and a lot of his university pals were big Alan Parsons fans.
Yeah.
And although my brother was probably at the age where he could have, because he's 6 years younger than me, so he could have embraced punk, because he would have been 17 or 18 when punk hit.
Yeah.
They weren't interested at all. None of his lot were interested. No.
Well, Anthony, on the basis that you want to at some point have some lunch, I should probably move us on to our last question, unless you had anything else.
Yes,
for
no,
with
absolutely.
The final vault.
Yes.
The last question is really very much going back to your music and your career. And what we say to people is said, look, in the context of what we do, which is to try and raise as much money as we can for the charity, Make a Difference with Records, that's why we exist. Which one of your own albums do you think would be most appropriate to donate to that particular cause?
I think Slow Dance. A close second would be The Geese and the Ghost, but I intend to donate a vinyl copy of The Geese and the Ghost.
That would be wonderful.
Yes.
So Slow Dance, of course, we have here in CD format, which Anthony will sign, but The Geese and the Ghost in vinyl would be splendid.
Yes, and I'll sign that. Yeah.
Indeed, which would be wonderful.
Good.
And Slow Dance pipped Geese and Ghost to the post because...
I think because of the journey it goes through.
Yeah, and your personal journey that you went through.
Yeah, and it was the first time I'd had a chance to do a big album for a long time, and whereas I had Mike's help, so it's like I'm going through a personal journey and a struggle through it, and then the piece it leaves you with at the end was something I was very pleased with.
It's a beautiful album.
Thank you.
Beautiful album. Anthony,
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time. Really, it's been been an absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
That was part 2 of a 2-part audio and video podcast with the former Genesis guitarist Anthony Phillips. It was brought to you by Godalming-based Make a Difference with Records. We donate all our proceeds to the charity Catalyst, who are best known for their work in the mental health space.